Have you ever noticed that people will spend their entire lives loving someone who thinks differently and still build workplaces that may never give that same person a chance? That's what we're digging into today in this episode. And I'm going to ask you a question you may have never let yourself answer honestly before. Hi, I'm Dr. Theresa Haskins, and welcome to Think Differently, the podcast that challenges the status quo and explores the power of neurodiversity to create a more inclusive and accessible world. Together, we will talk about everything from the value of different perspectives to the limitless potential of human beings. We'll explore how embracing differences can lead to endless possibilities and how you can maximize strengths to make a positive impact on the world. So sit back, relax, and join me as we get ready to think differently. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Think Differently. Today I want to ask you something that might sit with you a little uncomfortably, and I want you to stay with me for a moment because I'm not asking this to make anyone feel guilty, and I'm definitely not asking it as an attack. I'm asking this question because after years of doing this work, I don't think most of us have really ever let ourselves answer the question I'm going to ask you honestly. But before I ask that question, let me tell you what keeps happening everywhere I go. After a keynote speaking engagement or workshop, after a conversation with a leadership team, someone almost always waits until everyone else clears out of the room and then they come find me. And the conversation usually starts the same way. My son is autistic. My daughter has ADHD. My nephew is brilliant, but school has been hard. My brother never fit in anywhere, but he can build anything. And something shifts in their voice when they're talking to me. Sometimes it's pride or relief. Sometimes I can see the exhaustion, but the joy of being seen. But underneath all of it is usually the same thing. It's clear that they love this person deeply and fiercely, and they're trying to figure out what kind of future the world is going to allow them to have. And I've had these conversations with corporations, government agencies, and universities, and of course, like I said, hallways, where people suddenly feel safe enough to say the thing they haven't been able to say out loud. And after years of hearing these stories, I find myself sitting with a question that frankly makes people uncomfortable. Not because it's cruel, but because most people have never actually let themselves answer it honestly. So here it is. You love them, but would you hire them? And when I say them, most of you have already pictured someone before I finish the sentence. Your son, daughter, a student, sibling, maybe even yourself. Hard question, right? So here's what I've noticed. The people having those hallway conversations with me, they're not strangers to this. They're not people who have never thought about disability or neurodiversity inclusion before. They're people who live with it, who love someone inside of it every single day. And yet, I sit in other rooms with some of those same people, hiring rooms, talent reviews, leadership discussions, class planning, about who's ready to move up, maybe be promoted. And I hear things like, well, they weren't polished enough. This individual struggled with eye contact. They seemed a little awkward in the interview process. They're clearly smart, but that but is what I'm always listening for. Because what comes after the but is usually where the real decision was already made. And I keep thinking, the person you just described, that might be someone's nephew or someone just like your daughter. Someone's kid who can build anything, but never quite learned how to perform comfort in a room full of neurotypical strangers. You love them at home. You want the world to accept them as they are. But you're technically screening people out just like everyone else is doing in the rest of the world you're fighting against. And I don't think that most of us even realize we're doing it. There are people working to change this. Obviously, I'm working to change this, and there are people who have decided to answer that question differently. One of these is a man by the name of Danny Combs. Years ago, I had him on this podcast, and he formed an organization called TACT. But before any of that, he was doing something that sounds simple and turned out to be actually quite radical. He was teaching neurodivergent young adults trades, welding, plumbing, high-paying skilled work, not programs built around what they couldn't do, not managing expectations or focusing on limitations, just teach them an employable skill, give them a real shot, let them try it out. And what he shared during that experience really stayed with me, because over and over again, he found that the young people and the employers were not the hardest part of the work. The parents were. Because Danny would tell parents about the roles he was going to prepare their child for, something skilled, something that would lead to a real livelihood, and the parents who loved their child completely, who would move mountains for them, were often hesitant and concerned. Are you sure they should be operating a welder? Isn't there a physical risk? He was laying pathways to trade work, and the people most uncertain about those opportunities were the ones that love these young adults the most. But Danny was gifted at getting parents to give their own kids a chance. And what happened next was that the parents would watch their child master something genuinely difficult and be surprised and proud and changed. His response was never frustration. It was patience and then proof. Just let them try. Get out of the way long enough to prove yourself wrong and be surprised. He understood something that I think about constantly. The ceiling isn't always out there in the world somewhere. Sometimes it lives inside the very people who love the neurodivergent person the most. And that's the thing I keep coming back to, because I think we've confused two things that feel the same, but they aren't. Loving someone personally and creating access professionally. Those are not the same thing. You can love a neurodistinct person fiercely, want every opportunity and education for them, want them to find meaningful work, and still not be able to picture them working alongside you in your company, sitting across from you in an interview, running one of your teams, being the person in the room who's making the call. And that's not because you're a bad person. It's because the image of what competence looks like has been so narrow for so long that even people who know better, even people who know firsthand what neurodistinct people are capable of, sometimes still can't see past it in certain contexts. We've built entire systems around one very specific kind of performance: extroversion, easy small talk, smooth, confident answers to hypothetical questions, the ability to seem relaxed in a room full of strangers on one of the most high-stakes stays in your professional life. And we dare call that assessing for fit. But what we're really doing is screening for social performance, not job performance, not skills, not whether the person could build, solve, lead, or create what we actually are trying to hire for. Just how well can they perform the version of themselves we're most comfortable with? I talk about this with my talent management students all the time. If we keep selecting for the same type of person, the same ways of working, the same backgrounds, the same ways of thinking and communicating, then we also have to own why our organizations struggle to innovate, why we keep solving the same problems the same ways and getting the same lousy results. It's not that the world is lacking talent. It's that we're lacking the willingness to recognize when it doesn't look the way we expect it. So I want to come back to where we started, because I don't think this question is really about hiring people, not at its core. I think it's about imagination, or lack thereof it. Can you picture the person you love, the neurodivergent person you do anything for, succeeding in the spaces you currently occupy at work, not being celebrated for overcoming something, not being an inspiration story, not being the example someone uses at a conference to show how far we've come in supporting neurodivergent people, just being accepted as an individual, doing the work, being good at it, being valued for what they bring like any other person. If that image doesn't come easily to you today, that's okay. We're not here to shame you for that. But I am here to ask you to notice it, to recognize when it's happening, to sit with that truth, to ask yourself where that ceiling lives and whether you put it there or whether you've been quietly supporting its existence. Because the gap between loving someone fully and believing what they're capable of truly doing, that gap has real consequences. It shows up in what opportunities we encourage them to pursue. It shows up in who ultimately gets hired in our own companies. It's going to determine who gets promoted, who even gets a chance to try. So Danny Combs figured out on a shop floor with a welding torch. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for the world to be ready. He just said, let them try. And they did, and they could, and employers were glad. So the question for the rest of us is whether we're willing to build systems that say the same thing, not just to the children we love, but to the adults they will become and to everyone else like them. The question isn't whether neurodistinct people exist in your life. They already do. They always have. The question is whether the systems you lead, the rooms you're responsible for, would you give them the opportunity to come in and show what they can do? And if not, when will you be willing to give them a chance to try? That's what I keep thinking about. And I hope after today you will too. Thanks for thinking differently with me. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Think Differently. I hope you found our discussion today insightful and thought-provoking. I want to thank AudioWorks Studios for their exceptional production and recording support. Without their expertise and dedication, this podcast would not be possible. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to share it with others. Your support helps us to reach new audiences and promote neurodiversity in our world. Also, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite platform so that you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. We look forward to seeing you again soon on Think Differently.